there a contradiction between that? Like, can I say that I want to raise my kids free from the pink-blue divide and all of this gender binary? And can I say that I want to resist the gender binary as a parent and still choose to find out the sex of the baby and let that answer influence how I do things, what I buy, and so on? Hi all, ciao visiem. So today I'm going to be talking about why we chose not to find out the sex of our baby. As of right now, tomorrow I'll be 24 weeks, so almost 6 months. I'm wearing my maternity leggings. The bump is here. As always, before all of these videos that have to do with parenting and babies and baby and parenting decisions, I think it's really important to give the disclaimer that, once again, I don't think that our decision not to find out the sex is somehow better or that I'm judging people who do find out the sex. In fact, I'll talk about some of the difficulties that we've faced and why I think it's perfectly valid. I mean, it's perfectly valid for anyone to do whatever they want. The point isn't to judge. There is no right or wrong decision. The right decision is whatever the right decision for you and your situation is. So let's just get that out of the way. Zero judgment. Though I do think that gender reveal parties are sexist, heteronormative, gross, violent, and have been proven to cause mass destruction. So maybe y'all shouldn't be doing those. And it's like really gross when you see those balloons pop and that like pink confetti come out, and you can like see the disappointment in the father's face, like in slow motion. I mean, like, talk about being traumatized as a child before you've even entered the world. But with all that being said, I do think it is interesting that finding out the sex of your baby when you're pregnant has definitely become the norm. In fact, I do not know a single person, couple, family who have chosen not to find out the sex, like in contemporary time. Like, not a single soul but us. So it's definitely the mainstream popular thing to do. Also think this topic is interesting because we as a society have become more critical of heteronormativity, of the gender binary. We sort of understand, or should understand, that there's more than just two genders, you know. There's awareness of trans people and trans rights, and just across the spectrum, I think there's been so much more education and awareness about this idea that gender cannot really be assigned at birth, that gender and sex are fluid, that they might change, and so on. So I think it's interesting that even with the growth in all of this knowledge, yet still everybody chooses to find out the sex of the baby. And I was just wondering, and once again, there's no right or wrong answer, but I was wondering for myself and in general, is there a contradiction between that? Like, can I say that I want to raise my kids free from the pink-blue divide and all of this gender binary? And can I say that I want to resist the gender binary as a parent and still choose to find out the sex of the baby and let that answer influence how I do things, what I buy, and so on? So those are just some things I was working through and thinking about. So in this video, first I'm going to talk about some of the main reasons why people choose to find out the sex of the baby. Did an Instagram poll and Instagram survey questionnaire, so I got a lot of really good and interesting answers. Then I'm going to talk about some of the reasons why we chose not to, why I definitely knew that I do not want to. And then I'll talk about the sort of unexpected benefits and difficulties that came with this decision. And, you know, I think in general, maybe, just maybe, my reasoning and choice may also encourage or inspire other people to not necessarily make the same decision of not finding out the sex of the baby, but perhaps question why we want to. And what do we do with that answer, and what impact does that have, which I think is really the more important question. Okay, so to begin with, as I said, I asked y'all on Instagram and I got a lot of responses. So some of the main reasons, and I have them written down here. So some of the main reasons people chose to find out the sex was to better plan. So there was this entire category of to better plan, to better prepare, preparing mentally and materially, just like planning category. To know what to buy, to get more excited, which is actually a very interesting point to me because I feel like it's so exciting regardless, but curiosity, simply curiosity, impatience, choosing a name, and then other people just said straight up like to buy gendered clothes, to choose a color for the nursery. Some people also said social pressure, you know, like family wanted to know, and to be able to share with others. So those were sort of the main reasons. Some of those reasons make more sense to me than others. For example, for planning, I'm genuinely wondering like what sort of planning does knowing the sex of the baby help you do that's not also inherently rooted in gender stereotypes and gender color coding and so on. Yeah, I can't think of any, but not saying there aren't any. But yeah, and then one point I did want to talk about, so a couple of the longer messages that I received sort of expanded on how people think that, you know, raising a girl versus raising a boy is different, especially doing so under patriarchy, and that, you know, you need to do different types of education and different type of parenting approaches and so on. And I actually strongly agree with that. I think this whole idea of raise your boys and girls the same, to some extent yes, but to some extent no, because we live in a world that operates under different systems of oppression and domination and so on. So of course, because of patriarchy, there are different things and different tools that I'm going to have to teach my girl than, you know, my boy child, just because they will be perceived differently, they will experience different problems, they will be categorized, and, you know, all the stuff that society, patriarchy inflicts violence on all of us, but that violence looks different on boy girls and boy babies or boy children and girl babies and girl children. So I do think that that is actually very true, and I know that for me specifically, that is part of the reason I'm very scared to have a boy, because I don't know how to do that. I've gone through my life as a woman, and I have a great understanding and idea of what that looks like and feels like, and what are the sort of lessons I wish I had learned when I was younger and so on. So I know that I would have to do a lot more education if I was having a boy and so on. So I actually agree with this point, and I think it's really crucial and important. But my thing is that none of this happens when your kid is a newborn. Like, we do not start having conversations with our 3-month-old about navigating patriarchy or, you know, like sexism, or, you know, like breaking harmful stereotypes like boys will be boys and things like that. That doesn't happen when they're a newborn, you know. Maybe it starts happening to some extent when they're a toddler or so on, but finding out the sex before the baby is born is really a very early enforcement of some sort of gender ideas. So I know that I will be raising and I will be doing certain things differently later on, but that does not mean that I need to know the sex right now. Like, honestly, for the first like year, all babies are just like a blob. I mean, you can't tell me that a 6 or a 7-month-old, like, it really matters what sex they are. Like, they'll just pee and poop, like, that's it. Okay, so getting into my reasons for not wanting to find out the sex, first of all, just to give some background, my mom did not find out my sex when she was pregnant with me. I guess it was less of a choice, since they simply, you know, back in the good old USSR when I was born, they simply weren't able to find out, so it just like wasn't a thing. But she also said that she did not want to find out. Both of them, my dad and her, did not want to find out, and she always told me, you know, growing up, that all she wanted was a healthy baby. Like, all she would pray for every day was just a healthy baby. Doesn't matter who that is. You know, I had a boy named picked out. I would have been a Robert if I was a boy, and a girl named picked out, and all she was praying for is just a healthy baby. Nothing else matters, nothing else matters. And I think that socialization, you know, like hearing the story that your parents passed down to you actually matters a lot. And I found that also from my Instagram surveys, because quite a few of the people who said that they actually also don't think they will find out the sex, it was because their parents also had chosen not to find out the sex. So I think it actually matters a lot. But as I've grown older and smarter, other reasons have added themselves to the list. So first and foremost, as I mentioned earlier, gender is not real. It's not a thing, you know. Sex can change. Heteronormativity is trash. The gender binary is trash. The gender binary, along with this violent heteronormativity, needs to be abolished. I think gender should be abolished. And when I say all of those things, which actually everybody in my community says and agrees with and stands behind, when I say them, I think, you know, I'm about them. And I think if you know me, you know that this is my biggest critique of academia and academics, is that so many of us are about certain ideas in theory, but when it comes to practice, we don't actually practice them. So I think a big reason for me, like the biggest reason for me, is that if this is what I'm about, if this is what I believe in, if I think that gender doesn't, you know, that it's not real, that I think that the gender binary should be abolished, if I want to resist heteronormativity and all of these things, then maybe I shouldn't find out the sex and enforce these gendered ideas on my own child and perpetuate this cycle. If my decision not to find out the sex, even in like the slightest, most minor of ways, chips at this gender binary, at this heteronormativity, at this pink-blue dichotomy and all of that, if it at all makes 1 or 2 or 3 people think about, hey, why do we find out the sex? Like, when we find out, how does that affect, you know, what we buy or what we think, and, you know, like how we continue to enforce this gender? If it at all does that in any slight way, I think it's my duty to do so and to contribute to that, or even to grapple with the idea of what it would be like if my child turns out to be trans, which, let me tell you, is not a thing that a lot of parents to be actually talk about or think about, and I think it's absolutely crucial. And I'm going to return to this point later, but oh boy, did it turn out to be not a minor thing at all. I've actually found that it's a huge thing and actually had a massive impact, and the amount of conversations that I've had about this goes to show that it does matter and it does have an impact to make this decision. Secondly, I had to ask myself and think about, you know, what would I do with the answer? Like, if I were to find out that I'm having a boy or I'm having a girl, how would this impact what happens next? And that is the question. If you take anything away from this video, take this away from this video. That is the question you should ask yourself, you know, what impact would that have? And honestly, anything that I could come up with was just some sort of form of enforcing gender stereotypes. Let me give you some examples of that. If I know the sex of the baby, I can buy gendered clothes, I can color code the nursery and do things like that. That is already a hard no for me. I am trying to actively avoid doing that, even if I did know the sex, because I'm trying to resist the gender binary and resist these gender stereotypes. So that was just always a no for me. And in fact, I'll do a video at some point later on what it looks like for us to raise a child and try to resist the gender binary when doing so. If I knew the sex, I can start to better plan for or imagine the future. And what people usually mean when they say that is like, if I know I'm having a boy, I can imagine that, you know, he's gonna play basketball because Isiah plays basketball. And, you know, like, you can start to like plan around it and imagine it and think about it and let your like head run wild with that. If I know that I'm having a girl, I can think about, you know, the dance lessons I want her to have, or about the like spa days that we're going to have, and so on. And girl, must I say this, literally all of this just relies on gender stereotypes and assumes that you can only do XYZ thing if you have a boy or a girl and not vice versa. I mean, it's like deeply problematic. Also inevitably places gendered expectations on your child, which I think is just really wrong. And this is why, as I talked about earlier, oftentimes you can literally see the disappointment in the parents' faces during those gender reveal videos, because they have certain gendered expectations of what they will do with a boy child or a girl child, and then those expectations go poof. And I wanted to read a really quick message I typed out from one of the people that responded. She said, "People who want a girl and their reasoning is to dress her in frilly dresses or wanting a boy to do stereotypical manly things base their preference of harmful stereotypes. The same stereotypes that tell women they cannot play football or become a mechanic, etc. The same stereotypes that tell men they can't love ballet or wear nail polish. We should have kids knowing they'll be their own individuals. You're not missing out on an experience because of gender. Gender will not determine your experience as a parent, your child's personality, or interests. It's society that forces them into gender stereotypical boxes. We shouldn't have kids for us or to do things that we like or to fulfill our desires, especially when those desires are based on heteronormativity and harmful gendered stereotypes. That, I think, is absolutely brilliantly said, and for me, just bottom line, if I say that I want to resist the gender binary as a parent, that I don't want to force my child into pink dresses or Spider-Man onesies or whatever, but I choose to find out the sex in utero and plan around that sex/gender, that didn't make sense to me. Okay, so those were our main reasons for choosing not to find out the sex. Now let me tell you about the unexpected difficulties and benefits that have come with that. So first, with the difficulties, the second I went public with my pregnancy and I told people I'm pregnant, the one and only question everyone was asking me was, what are you having? What are you having? That was like the only one. An experience, boo. I'm having an experience. It's truly wild and came as a huge surprise. I mean, I guess I was expecting for people to ask, but I thought that, announcing that you're pregnant is kind of big news as is. So I really didn't think that, announcing that you're pregnant is actually not enough if you don't give me the sex of the baby, which is what the real big thing is, I guess. So yeah, it was quite unexpected just how big of a deal it was. With that, of course, telling people that we're actually not finding out the sex of the baby became a huge deal. And with that, I guess the difficulty is that you have to explain your decision to other people, which for me personally has never been a difficulty because I stand very firmly in my beliefs and my choices and decisions, and I have no problems telling anybody, or justifying them to anybody. The only problem I did actually have was not wanting to offend people who did choose to find out the sex. So 99% of the time, if someone asked me, oh, what are you having, a boy or a girl? I would say, I don't know, we're keeping it a surprise. And just leave it at that. I wouldn't go into like the entire heteronormativity and gender binary being fake and all of that stuff. I would just leave it at that. Number two, and the only real difficulty that we faced and are still facing, and which is also the reason why I have no judgments for anybody who does choose to find out the sex, especially poor people, is that everything, goddamn everything is gendered. I am telling you, go on Amazon and look up baby clothes, baby cribs, baby whatever. It's all absolutely horrendously, violently gendered. What is also interesting to me is that newborn clothes are more heavily gendered than adult clothes. I mean, it makes no sense to me. They're also extremely ugly. That's a whole other rant I could go on. Like, can I just get some nice fashionable pieces? Like, why you gotta throw on 55 dinosaurs or 67 stars on every little item? Like, what's up with these like weird patterns? Anyways, so not finding out the sex of the baby does make shopping a lot more difficult. But with that, I would also say that not just not finding out the sex, because I could find out the sex of the baby, if I still want to resist the gender binary, I would still not want to buy all the pink princessy stuff for my girl and all the like trucks and cars stuff for my boy. And that is difficult. I mean, it is really difficult because everything is gendered. As I said, like blankets, towels, like every last tiny little sock is gendered. So finding things that are unisex really limits you a lot. And this is especially important if you are like me and you choose to buy all the clothes secondhand. It becomes an even bigger issue because for baby clothes secondhand, there's only one way really, cheap ones, the cheap clothes. There's only one way that they are sold, let me tell you. They are sold in boxes and the title is used baby boy clothes, or a box that says used baby girl clothes. So because of that, it has actually been massively difficult and it almost made me regret my decision. But then I talked to my mama, who is always right about everything, and I was complaining to her about this, and she literally told me, she said, will those used baby boy / baby girl clothes boxes suddenly disappear off a marketplace when you have the baby? What are you stressing about? Why can't you buy it after? She was like, when I was pregnant with you, when I delivered you at the hospital, all I had was one Lottie, which is a onesie, and that's it. And that was it. And you don't need more. So stop complaining and just get that box after the baby's born. And honestly, as always, she made perfect sense. Like, I really did not need boxes of clothes like months before the baby's born. It's like they're all gonna still be on Craigslist after. They're gonna be on Craigslist forever and ever. So it's really not that big of an issue. Regardless, as I said, this is a difficulty and it is something that you will face if you choose to not find out the sex of the baby. In fact, I'm looking at the bassinet, which we got recently on Craigslist. Let me just show you. Isn't it cute? We got it on Craigslist for free recently. Funny story, as always, we drive out there to pick it up and the mom comes out and, you know, she's like giving it to us and all, and then she's congratulating me because I'm pregnant and she's asking me, oh, so what are you having? I don't know, we're keeping it a surprise and so on. And then she has this plastic bag that she's holding in her hands and she goes, oh, well, we had a baby girl and, you know, I have some of the fitted sheets that fit the little mattress in the bassinet, you know, and like some of them are white, but most of them are pink. And she's looking at me like, so, and I was like, I really don't mind if I have a baby boy and he sleeps on a pink sheet. Like, that's really not an issue for me. It was almost like, you know, she felt like it would be almost offensive to give us these pink sheets just in case we have a boy. And yeah, it's wild. These things are so deep-rooted, man. These were the only two difficulties. Now, the two benefits that I could say that the unexpected sort of benefits that happened because we chose not to find out the sex, and why you may want to consider it as well. So first of all, it has allowed for Isiah and I to imagine and work through a much wider range of experiences and possibilities than it otherwise would have. I think almost anyone who's pregnant or been pregnant knows how it goes. So you find out you're pregnant, and for the first 3-ish or so months, you don't know what the sex is, and you know, it sort of allows you to your mind is completely open. Whenever you see a little cute baby girl on the street, you think, oh my God, you know, could this be our baby girl? Is our baby girl gonna look like this? Or you see a baby boy on TV or something and you think, oh my God, imagine, like, this could be us, like, we could be doing this. And you have all these, like, it's really like wild and unlimited, the things that you imagine. And then you have that ultrasound or the anatomy scan and you find out the sex, and all of a sudden it's cut. And you inevitably lock half of it out. Now you're in one experience only. You're only in the girl or in the boy zone, and that is it. And that is, you know, from then on, when you see, I'm not saying when you see like kids of the opposite sex, you won't think they're cute and stuff, but it's not the same relation, and you're really focusing on and thinking about, oh, you know, like, we're gonna have a girl, and this is what's, you know, this is what it's gonna be like, and this is what we are gonna think about, and so on. Stuff is irrelevant at that point. So we start thinking about, you know, how are we gonna raise a girl? What are we gonna do, you know, like, when she brings home her boyfriend or girlfriend, how will we protect and educate her, and so on. And we just focused on that one side of things. But for us, for Isiah and I, it never became limited. And it's honestly been like the biggest unexpected blessing and a gift that just keeps on giving, because we just have to allow for any possibility to anything to be a reality. And so we need to we're forced to sort of think through all options up until I give birth. So that's 9-10 months of thinking about everything rather than sort of a more narrow version of that. So basically, because of this decision, we are not locked into an experience. We can't give in to any gendered assumptions. We have to let all possibilities be real, be a potential reality. And the second thing, which is just a really small thing and something I hadn't thought about initially, is that the birth experience is definitely something you look forward to regardless, whether you know the sex or not. This is going to be the most sacred, most amazing experience. But for me also, knowing that it is during that experience, during that extremely heightened emotion and this event that like a year of my life and bodily changes has been leading up to know that it is also at that moment that I will find out the sex of the baby has somehow made it like more special. It's almost like I'm looking forward to it a little bit more. Okay, I'm gonna cut the video here because it's gonna be too long. As I said before, I also want to make a video on what it looks like for us to resist the gender binary as parents. You know, we've had so many conversations, like starting from like a month into this pregnancy, Isiah and I, about like what it would be like to have a gay child, the bi child, the trans child. Like, it's honestly the cutest thing. Isiah always says, like, if our kid comes out as gay, you know, first I'm not gonna say anything. I'm just gonna hug them. And then I'm gonna tell them, I love you. And then I'll listen. And then we'll be so supportive. And like, honestly, makes me want to cry. Like, we've had all those conversations. And yeah, there's a lot more that I could talk about that. If you have any questions or ideas for that video, feel free to comment them below. If you have any questions or comments for this video, if you want to share your experience and why you chose to find out or not, or whatever, feel free to comment below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'm sending you so much love. I also did a poll on Instagram in which I asked, imagine that tomorrow you wake up and you find out you're pregnant. Will you find out the sex of your baby? And I would just like to publicly say that I am sorry for making that poll, and I'm disregarding all of the results of that poll. That was my mistake, because the results came out something like 64% of people said that they would absolutely not find out the sex, and then like 36 or whatever percent said they would find out the sex. That data just does not match reality at all, because as I told you, apart from myself, I don't know a single other person who actually has chosen not to find out the sex. And I think like it was my fault on asking the question, because it is so different to think about this in terms of a hypothetical and to answer this question when you're actually pregnant. Honestly, it's day and night, and I don't think we can answer that question when you don't have that baby in your belly and you're not going through that experience. So anyways, that was just a side note.